Sacrificial silence. From St. Peter Julian Amard, quote, "Silence is the guardian of the heart's peace and the soul's purity," unquote. Who talks during his or her sacrificial wedding celebration without making a sound, and while journeying through the past, present, and future? What wonders? Quote, "Have confidence in the Lord with all thy heart, and lean not upon thy own prudence. In all thy ways think on him, and he will direct thy steps," unquote. Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 through 6. Sacrificial silence and one's presence in God's house with the real presence of Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament. Quote, "What we need most in order to make progress is to be silent before this great God, with our appetite and with our tongue, for the language he best hears is silent love," unquote. St. John of the Cross. Who talks during his or her sacrificial wedding celebration without making a sound, and while journeying through the past, present, and future? From St. Augustine, quote, "He, Jesus, was created by a mother whom he created. He was carried by hands that he formed. He cried in the manger in wordless infancy. He, the Word, without whom all human eloquence is mute," unquote. The holy silence is also the wedding conversation, which is so pleasing to our triune God, particularly when one is suffering in union with Christ and is unable to think, pray, and offer a coherent thought on such a solemn and sacred occasion. From Saint Therese of Lisieux, quote, "When I think that, for a sorrow born with joy, I shall be able to love you more for all eternity, I understand clearly that if you gave me the entire universe with all its treasures, it would be nothing in comparison to the slightest suffering. The more the soul grows in love, the more it must grow in suffering too," unquote. Wedding conversation. Who laments with utmost trust to his or her divine spouse, the God-man, on his or her wedding day to Christ, in the church and during the majestic, celebratory, and completely personally costly offering of the traditional Tridentine holy sacrifice of the Mass celebrated in Latin. The same person in need of the best doctor, Emmanuel, our divine physician. Quote, "Sanctify yourself, and you will sanctify society," unquote. St. Francis of Assisi. The wedding music is the holy silence, and from the holy silence comes the most exquisite, sacrificially loving symphony that makes no sound. Divine royal wedding music that costs no money. What wonders? Who sheds bloody tears and offers to God a bloody sweat during one's own wedding? From Saint Bonaventure, quote, "He who desires to go on advancing from virtue to virtue, from grace to grace, should meditate continually on the passion of Jesus. There is no practice more profitable for the entire sanctification of the soul than the frequent meditation of the sufferings of Jesus Christ," unquote. The consecration. While the prayers of reparation to the holy face of Jesus are offered privately to Almighty God during the daily offering of the traditional Tridentine holy sacrifice of the Mass celebrated in Latin, and as souls are wed to Christ the divine bridegroom anew this morning, the suffering holy face of Jesus is offered to Almighty God once again as he wills. However, this time Jesus takes the specific offering of his holy face, suffering during his sacred passion, and combines it with the offering of the sorrowful, suffering, holy face of his Immaculate Mother to our eternal Father at his high altar, where heaven meets earth on Mount Calvary for the sake of the whole world. Following the consecration of the bread into the Holy Eucharist, Jesus places the elevated sacred host, being held in his sacred hands in the supernatural, onto the high altar to his left facing east, and places the sacred host there next to all the other offerings of self that have already been placed there in spirit. The ongoing analogy or metaphor of the poker game reveals that the Holy Eucharist is the unfathomable and immeasurably valuable currency of heaven, and the union of our immolated selves with Christ's apostolic mission in his time, in our time, through time, and within his real presence received in the Blessed Sacrament during Holy Communion, is added to the accruing winnings on the table after having already folded one's winning hand on the winning side, having agreed with God to lose in order to ultimately win and never again lose in the next life. However, heaven's currency does not just contain its own set value, it bears by the divine power of God precious, priceless, and eternally valuable fruit that is sacrificially loving and self-giving, and for that reason its value has the incredible potential to keep growing exponentially. It can, it does, it has, and it will. Holy Communion and an apostolic mission. The green fabric behind the high altar is brought to your attention in an extraordinary manner during this wedding sacrifice, and it is noted in the supernatural that some of the walls where you work properly caring for others in need are green also. Green signifies tranquility, peace, renewal, fertility, and growth. Green is also the color of the local paper money, and that color can also signify a lack of well-being, illness, envy, and greed. At the high altar, kneeling just prior to receiving the real presence of our divine restorer during Holy Communion, a request is suddenly made to Jesus, the divine bridegroom of every soul, at this sacred time to correct the troubled state most modern marriages are in. Divine union with the ongoing sufferings of Jesus within his real presence in the Blessed Sacrament, together with those of his Immaculate Mother. What soul eager to be wed anew and unified with Jesus focuses, and with purity of intention, not on himself or herself on this incredible occasion, but on accomplishing the most perfect will of Almighty God, in imitation of and in union with Christ, the divine bridegroom of every soul, for the sake of every single other person, and without seeking personal gain. Help to satisfy Christ's longing to be loved in return. Let us begin the correct way with ourselves. The grace and the strength to accomplish God's will as he wills it comes from God. All each one has to do is be willing. From Saint Philip Neri, quote, "In order to be perfect, we must not only obey and honor our superiors, we must honor our equals and inferiors also." Unquote. Laborare est orare. To work is to pray. Thanks be to God. Off to work to pray some more. From St. Francis of Assisi, quote, "Jesus is happy to come with us, as truth is happy to be spoken, as life to be lived, as light to be lit, as love is to be loved, as joy to be given, as peace to be spread."